Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of RPGs with Paddy. I'm Paddy. As you probably know, my channel mostly focuses on Call of Cthulhu, and in particular, Cthulhu by Gaslight, which is a Victorian era setting for Call of Cthulhu. So, with the newest version of Cthulhu by Gaslight on the way, I thought it would be good to kind of go over what we know so far. So first, just background in case any of you don't know. What are the previous versions of Cthulhu by Gaslight? So we've already had 3 editions of it. The first one came out in 1986 and was quickly followed by the second edition in 1988. There weren't that many changes to it. And then there was a long gap until 2012 when the third edition came out, and that's the most recent edition that we have now. Just a little bit of terminology, because I know that this can be a bit confusing. The upcoming release will be the 4th edition of Cthulhu by Gaslight, and it will be compatible with the 7th edition rules for Call of Cthulhu. So you might hear some people referring to it as the 4th edition or the 7th edition. That's why. It's the 4th edition of Cthulhu by Gaslight, but it will use the rules for the 7th edition of Call of Cthulhu. So now for the 7th edition of Call of Cthulhu, technically we do have Cthulhu Through the Ages already. This was released in 2015 and it gives just a handful of pages for rules for playing Call of Cthulhu in different settings, and Cthulhu by Gaslight being one of them. But it was really bare bones. It was only about 7 or 8 pages for Cthulhu by Gaslight. So it's not really important, and I don't think it's really indicative of what we're going to get in this newest release, which is going to be quite extensive, I think. I'll talk about that below. So just a quick note as well before we get into the details. Chaosium have teamed up with Aconite Books. So Chaosium, again, in case anyone doesn't know, Chaosium are the company that produce the Call of Cthulhu RPG products. And Aconite Books create a lot of in-world fiction for various IPs, such as the board games Arkham Horror, Twilight Imperium, the role-playing game Legends of the Five Rings, and stuff like that. So Aconite Games will be producing some novels and or short stories for the Cthulhu by Gaslight setting, and also the recently released Regency Cthulhu setting. I will be reviewing the first novel for Cthulhu by Gaslight, which is called The Shadow on the Glass, when it comes out this July. I'm currently reading some of the author's previous works just to get a feel for his writing style. Now, on to the newest version of Cthulhu by Gaslight. We know that Chaosium have 4 books that they want to release for this. First will be a player-facing source book, which will have a lot of the details and information about the setting, but with no information about the mythos and no spoilers for any adventures. That will be accompanied by a keeper-facing, or GM-facing, Game Master-facing, book, which has more secrets, more mythos, and it should have a few scenarios as well. There were some whispers that this might be a box set, but that idea has been scrapped. There are still some rumors that it might be available as a slipcase set, but I doubt that. The idea of a player-facing book is probably partially about increasing sales. Most of the Call of Cthulhu books are keeper-facing, so only keepers buy those, so it's fairly limited sales. So I would imagine that both of these books will be sold separately, but I don't know. As of December 2021, Mike Mason said he wasn't sure if they would be released together or if it would be one released first and then the next one. But the idea for these 2 games is that you will be able to play Cthulhu by Gaslight with just these 2 books. You won't need the Call of Cthulhu Keeper Rulebook or the Investigator Handbook, but you can certainly add them in, and they're talking about adding in pulp variations as well. We have already seen one part of the newest edition, and it's a beautiful map of London by Alyssa Faden, who's a great cartographer who's worked for many RPG companies. She says she was asked to do some of the maps for it, so that suggests that, she's done several, and then there are also several more. This is her work in progress for the map that she posted in August 2022. So I think it's pretty close to the final version. There is a video time lapse of her work, but it is an unlisted video, so I'm not sure if I should be sharing it here. So I'm just going to show you the photo. As I said, she calls it a work in progress, but it looks pretty final to me. I also know that one scenario, which I have reviewed on this channel from previous versions of Call of Cthulhu by Gaslight, one of them has been overhauled and significantly expanded for the 7th edition. I don't want to give away too many spoilers in case you want surprises, so I'm just going to flash it on screen now, and you can watch my video on it if you want, and you might even find more details from the author in the comments on that video. There are also 2 other books in the work. The first is the most clear-cut one that we know about. It's a Cthulhu by Gaslight campaign called The Curse of Seven. This is actually, as Mike Mason pointed out in an interview, this is going to be the first campaign for Cthulhu by Gaslight that Chaosium produces. It's going to be spearheaded by Penelope Love with assistance from her husband, Mark Morrison. Penelope has many writing credentials with Chaosium, most notably with Terror Australis, the Australian sourcebook and adventures there. But also she has contributions with Horror on the Orient Express, Reign of Terror, and several others. She also has a very interesting story in the anthology Sisterhood, which was released by Chaosium Just Fiction. It's a pretty good read about nuns in Venice during the plague timeline, the Black Plague. And I could definitely see, I haven't minded yet, but I could definitely see myself taking a lot of ideas from that for making my own homebrew scenarios. Mark Morrison, the other kind of lead author or support author, he was also instrumental in Terror Australis. He was involved in Horror on the Orient Express again, and I think he wrote or co-wrote the original Dreamland setting book. So both of them really have an extensive history with the game Call of Cthulhu, but not specifically with Cthulhu by Gaslight. In a 2019 interview, Penelope said that she had already finished writing the campaign. So it means that the campaign has been finished for, 4 to 5 years now. Although she did mention at that time that it still had a working title, which was The Curse of Seven. The name seems to have been solidified, that's it. But probably the campaign did go through some reworking after playtesting as well. Mike Mason said that he really wants to make sure that all of the products that Chaosium releases, not just for Gaslight, all of them are of the highest quality to do justice both to the authors who are, working really hard on them, but also to produce the best player experience as well. So that's why the product releases are a good bit slower than ideal. But for, a pretty small team in Chaosium, they really do produce excellent material. The production quality for 7th edition has been top-notch. So I think most people do agree that it is worth the wait, although I know we're impatiently waiting for the newest release of Cthulhu by Gaslight. So now, the next bit may be a tiny spoiler, so do mute your speakers or skip about 30 seconds. I'll have this tag up in the corner here that says spoiler, and when that's gone, the spoiler will be over. It's pretty minor. But just if you don't want any information about the campaign, skip that. So in the same interview, Penelope said that there are 7 major NPCs, and all of them are cursed, hence the name The Curse of Seven, or The Curse of the Seven. Now, I'll admit, actually, that was different from the idea that I had when I heard the title, but of course it does make sense. It will have some influence from a lot of Victorian and Edwardian ghost story writers, so like Charles Dickens, the Benson brothers, M.R. James, and so on. Now, each of the scenarios, or each of the chapters, I guess, of the campaign, of which there are 7, I think, all of them were written by different authors. And this is how Horror on the Orient Express was done as well. So you can look at Horror on the Orient Express for a bit of a comparison about how smoothly the scenarios will flow together to make a campaign. I'm a little bit more skeptic about the Curse of 7. Horror on the Orient Express had a very clear connecting mechanism of, the Orient Express traveling across Europe. But I wonder how well it will all flow together in this campaign. But I'm hoping, given how much time they've been spending on this and knowing the quality and pedigree of the writers, I want to say I'm sure, I'm very, very hopeful that it's going to be great. And that's the end of the spoiler section, so note to myself, take this down now. The final book that has been announced is a collection of scenarios. There's not much detail about this yet, and I would expect it will probably come out at least a year or even more after the release of the core books. That's just a guess on my part, but we know that the production cycle can take a long time. We don't know anything about the scenarios. Nothing's been released. But most of the scenario compilations from Chaosium have had about 5 or 6 scenarios in them. So I'd hope to see that number again. Alternatively, it could be maybe 3 slightly longer scenarios, like it was in the Dark Designs adventure scenario book for Cthulhu by Gaslight. But I would veer more towards 5 or 6 slightly shorter adventures rather than 3 longer ones. But it's totally an unknown at this stage. So those are the 4 books that we vaguely know about anyway, coming out, or the 4 releases anyway. There was some talk by Rick Meintz that both Gaslight and Dreamlands releases, the newest releases, would also get their own starter set. I think this is a fantastic idea, and I would love to see it. I really, really love to see it. The Call of Cthulhu starter set is amazing. It starts with a solo adventure, like a choose-your-own-adventure style game book, and then it gives you a scenario meant for 1 keeper and 1 player, and then there's 2 other great scenarios as well. So you really kind of build up your skill running the game and getting to know the setting without too much kind of pressure. So I think it's really great to introduce people to the game. If they did that for Gaslight and Dreamlands, I think it would be incredible and it would really make it more popular. But I doubt it will happen. The mention by Rick was just in passing in an interview. It was almost a throwaway line. And Rick is really more involved in Chaosium's RuneQuest product line. And in all of the forums and all of the interviews, to my knowledge anyway, Mike Mason has never mentioned any of that publicly. So it might have been some idle chat in-house that wasn't really decided on, and then Rick, inadvertently mentioned it. Other information in various forums, Mike Mason has said that there will be support for playing different kinds of upper class people and lower class people. And as it's Cthulhu by Gaslight, it will focus mostly on London and then to a lesser extent on the UK. But there are some rumours that it would be connected to the east coast of America as well. Mike mentioned that it would be great. I don't know if that was just aspirational or, that's what they want. But he said it would be great if they could have some kind of connection from Down Darker Trails to Cthulhu by Gaslight. So Down Darker Trails is kind of like their cowboy, weird west setting around the 1860s. So around about 20 years before the Gaslight setting. So when might we hear some news? It's really hard to say. As I mentioned earlier, Chaosium are quite slow at putting a lot of their stuff out. But they do that for two reasons that I mentioned before. It's a small team working on it, and they're really committed to high quality production. And I'm all for that. I think a lot of people agree that quality is much more important than a rush job. We have seen some products of old beloved settings being pushed out to disappointment, like D&D's Spelljammer was very underwhelming. A lot of people said I haven't looked at it yet. And of course, while we want everything now, the final product will hopefully, and I think it will be, worth the wait. Regency Cthulhu is the most recent setting that Chaosium put out, and that was announced at the PAX convention in October 2022 with a release date later that month, and it was eventually postponed to November. I think it was actually announced earlier in the year, but with no fixed date, but I can't find that date anymore. So I would guess that Chaosium Con, the Chaosium convention, in April this year, or possibly next year in 2025, or PAX, the PAX convention in Australia in October this year, I would say one of those three events is when we finally get the release date of this long-awaited update. So that is where we stand at the moment. If anyone has any more information, please let me know in the comments. Everyone is dying to know more information. If there's anything you want to correct me on as well, if I made any mistakes, let me know below. The release of 7th edition Cthulhu by Gaslight is something that people have been asking for almost a decade now, and I really hope it sells well and thus will be supported better by Chaosium. But we do already have some great products out there. Stygian Fox have Hudson and Brand and a few other scenarios. And we're already starting to see some community content for Cthulhu by Gaslight pop up in the Miskatonic repository. Okay, so that's going to do it for today. Hopefully you found some useful information here. And let's hope that we hear about the release for Cthulhu by Gaslight soon. Okay, take it easy everyone, and I will see you next time. Bye.